All right, welcome back. Now we get into our weekly feature where we unpack the top stories of the week. From the latest fallout in the government of national unity over the axing of the DA's deputy minister to the escalations in the Middle East following the US's involvement in the Israel-Iran conflict. We now speak to University of Johannesburg International Relations expert Dr. Oscar van Heerden. We're joined as well by political analyst Dr. Ibrahim Harvey, as well as former veteran journalist Mr. Matata Tsedu, who's actually penned the most interesting piece on the remains of former president of Zambia, Edgar Lungu. Still very much in South Africa, and we'll get to that as well. But send us a WhatsApp on the stories that stood out for you and really got you thinking in the week that was. That number is 072-110-5584, and we'll bring that up on the screen on the side there for that for you to be able to send us your text. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. I think, Dr. Harvey, I do want to start with you and go immediately into the story that seems to be developing incredibly fast right now. The DA versus the ANC. Is this, and I'm just going to go direct with this one, is this moment a concerning one for the stability of the government of national unity in your view?
I know it's not just deeply concerning. I think really you've got to appreciate the background to this current debacle involving the Deputy Minister of Trade and Industry, Whitfield, and what action was taken against him. On the same channel, I don't know if you listened to Helen Zille today earlier.
Of course.
She dealt comprehensively with listen very closly to how she dealt with this matter. I think Ramaphosa, shot himself in the foot, and the ANC. If you listen carefully to her, his action was unwarranted for a number of reasons. And I'll tell you, because of the background, the GNU has become really a serious problem. And I think this particular crisis, you can see the threats they're making already, Zille and the DA, regarding this matter. And I think, honestly, they have a very strong point. If you look at the action taken by Ramaphosa against him, ill-placed, if you listen to Zille, vis-a-vis the contentions, the arguments raised by the DA about the people who have been fingered by the Zondo Commission of Inquiry, a lot of criminal allegations, who are part of that cabinet, who are ministers, it's inherently untenable. And I think they really have a serious argument to make, and I support that argument. I really think that the GNU, I was very cynical about gaining more and more momentum moving towards, I think, what is going to be a blow-up. I don't think this GNU is going to survive. And the ANC pulls out. Who is the ANC going to be dealing with in order to be able to summon a workable majority? They're going to probably have to deal with what they ideologically very much against, that is the MK and the EFF in particular. They might be forced in that direction if the DA is kicked out or they resign or whatever happens. And I don't think the ANC has thought very carefully about the consequences of the DA being kicked out of the GNU. What is going to happen subsequent to that, to the ANC in Parliament? Yeah. I really don't think besides the inherent problems of the action that Ramaphosa has taken, really, and you listen to Zille very closely, and honestly, I supported what she had to say, especially since I would like to hear any countervailing arguments against what she said on this channel today.
Yeah, well, let's hear the other arguments that are put together by our other panelists. Mr. Tsedu, I'll come to you. Dr. Harvey, talking about that interview with Helen Zille on the channel, and I did watch it very closely. One of the things that she talked about was that it is because of the position of the DA inside this government of national unity that the president is in that presidential office to begin with. And now there's talk of a motion of no confidence against the president. One of the other things that she talked about, Mr. Tsedu, was that without the Democratic Alliance, a government of national unity that includes, for instance, the MK or EFF, she says, would be bad for economic stability. So is this a crisis moment? And what do you make about the arguments that she's put forward about a GNU without DA?
Oh, I think firstly we have to deal with the facts themselves. And that is that Whitfield went to the US without written permission by the president, which is a mandatory thing. So he was wrong. Other deputy ministers, no minister has ever done this, but other deputy ministers before, like Winnie and Madala Rutledge, were fired for the same thing. So what is so special about Whitfield that he can do something wrong and then he shouldn't be fired because he comes from the DA? That's nonsense, as far as I'm concerned. And insofar as the DA's own position within the GNU is concerned, it's quite clear that business wants them there, so it's not going to allow them to walk out. That's why they didn't walk out yesterday. And secondly, the guys who are already in government are on the gravy train. They are not just going to walk away from all the packs simply because Whitfield was stupid enough to take a trip to the US when another DA minister, George, canceled his trip because the president said, you can't go.
Yeah, interesting. Dr. Van Heerden, I see you smiling there when Mr. Zedu talks about how DA ministers are also on the gravy train. But the point that he's made around business being in support of a DA-membered GNU, is this a moment that then says, well, the GNU is going to hold, that we will move past this moment? And certainly we've seen, tugs of war between the DA and the ANC before, and yet GNU remained strong and standing.
Yeah, thanks, Naledi. I want to agree with Mr. Tsedu. If they felt so strongly about this matter, they would have left yesterday. And not say they are leaving the national dialogue, something that hasn't even happened yet. So that's the first thing. The second thing I want to say is that when they joined the executive, 6 ministers and deputy ministers and so forth, those same ministers that they now are crying about were in the executive. Why wait until this moment to now want to say that there are ministers that have been alleged to be involved in corruption and so on and so forth? Prior to the firing of Whitfield, they were quite happy to serve in the same executive with those ministers. So it's just much ado about nothing. This is you don't govern through ultimatums and threats. The president was correct in not even responding to the issue. So I think that it's a lot of bluster. It's a lot of political positioning and wanting to satisfy their support base. But at the end of the day, I agree with Mr. Tsedu. They are not going to leave the GNU, not only because of the gravy train, but also because their main constituents, which is business, is saying that they have to stay within the GNU. So I think Steenhuisen is blowing up smoke, and I don't think that it needs to be taken serious.
Dr. Harvey, the withdrawal from the National Dialogue.
I also wanted
go
to
ahead,
say,
go ahead, Mr. Tsedu. Yes, go ahead, Mr. Tsedu.
Yeah, I wanted to also add that this whole thing about not voting for certain budgets, it's also another bluster, because the budget in the end is going to be passed as a whole. If there are 2 votes, budget votes that are not going through, the whole budget doesn't go through, including the budget for agriculture, which Steenhuisen presides over. So even this thing of bringing the national dialogue into this picture, what has the national dialogue got to do with the price of sugar here, really? They should deal with their own men who did wrong and accept that that is what the law is. They say things must be done according to the law. The law says the president must give permission. If he doesn't, you don't. You can't say because he didn't say no, I assumed he was saying right. That's not how life works.
Yeah, but we've been talking about this national dialogue for months, Dr. Harvey. I mean, what do you make of that withdrawal?
Yeah, Naledi, let me be honest. I need to respond to the 2 panelists. There are a number of issues to be said. Let me start off by saying Zilla draws attention to the ministerial handbook. I haven't read it, but she is very emphatic about the fact that Whitfield went there not as a cabinet minister in a government. He went there as leader of the Eastern Cape. Not as, and in fact, it was a matter of courtesy on his part that he informed Ramaphosa about this thing. And you've seen how Ramaphosa, I mean, how unpresidential can you be? No response at all. And I think he must have thought, to hell with it, and he went off, you know. But nobody has contested and differed. I've not heard it from the two speakers, what Zilla has drawn attention to, that he did not, in fact, need the official permission, but as a matter of courtesy. And she knows, she seems to be knowing very well, I've not looked at the handbook, but that he didn't require presidential permission because they went there in the capacity as Eastern Cape DA leader, not as a member of parliament. Number two, she draws attention repeatedly to the declaration of intent, critical and central to which is constant communication and consultation with the DA and other members of the Government of National Unity on major issues. She draws attention from the outset, expropriation bill and the rest of the other contentious legislation. They did not consult with repeatedly. Listen to that interview. Now, I think to, just drive roughshod over this, dismiss it as the two panelists seems to be doing, I think really leaves a bitter taste in my mouth. And don't forget Simelane. Don't forget a number of the other ministers who've been seriously implicated with significant evidence to the effect of wrongdoing. How can you dismiss that? How can you tell me that, they just, why did they, accept it before and now making a big thing of it? I think, it tells me a lot about what the thinking is and the neglect of these serious issues by panelists here tonight who seems to be not caring too much about those issues. It's a major unpalatable contradiction to be talking about corruption and so on, and then entertaining in your ranks, in the GNU, in the ANC, in the cabinet, people who have been seriously implicated with significant, substantial evidence of wrongdoing and corruption, dating back to Zondo and beyond. So please, man, let's get serious here. Naledi.
Okay, Mr. Tsedu, I see you want to say something. Go ahead. I'm going to let you have one more comment and then we need to move on to another theme. But do you want to say something?
Okay. Just to say that once Mr. Whitfield was appointed as a deputy minister, he becomes part of government. So even if he's traveling in his private capacity anywhere, the state has to make sure that there is enough security for him and all sorts of other things. Not necessarily the ticket. He can buy his own ticket, but the state is responsible. You can't have a situation where you have a deputy minister in Washington who is doing some business there and the embassy doesn't even know, it's not aware of what he's up to, and then something happens to him and there's a whole hullabaloo. How does this state work where their member is there and is not even protected and things like that? I find it interesting that Ibrahim is sounding very much like Helen. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna need to move on, but thank you so much for the fiery contributions, certainly to that part of the discussion. Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Van Heerden, your final thoughts on that one.
Quickly,
yes.
Just very quickly, innocent until proven guilty. There's lots of allegations about ministers. We are not denying that. Zondo has got lots of allegations and so forth. A court of law has not ruled on these individuals. I think Harvey must not allow emotions to get the better of him. These ministers have not been found guilty of wrongdoing, and that is the point.
Okay.
Similarly, the law must be upheld here. I want to agree with Mr. Tsedu. The prerogative is with the president. You are not going to be saying you're going as an individual. When Whitfield goes to the US as a leader of DA Eastern Cape, does something wrong there, claps a person or jumps a red light, is not going to be the leader of the Eastern Cape. It's going to be a deputy minister of South Africa.
Okay.
So let's not play with words. Helen Zille is playing with words, trying to maneuver around the issue. He did wrong. He did not have permission. He got fired.
Okay, I need to wrap it up here. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we've got other things to look at. Of course, Iran, Israel, and the entry of the US. I think something that needs to be looked at. And also, as we look at Iran and Israel, just how much attention now is being given still to the situation for the most desperate that are in Gaza. We'll get some perspective on that. And let's not forget, Zambian former President Edgar Lungu's remains are still here in South Africa. Mr. Zedu's written about that as well. We get into that and more on the other side of this. Welcome back. You're still watching Newsfeed PM, the late edition. We continue with our weekly feature where we look back at some of the top stories of the week with our panel, of course, Dr. Oscar van Heerden, Dr. Ibrahim Harvey, and Mr. Matata Zedu still on our panel. I do want to start looking at the situation in the Middle East. And Dr. van Heerden, perhaps you can assist us with this part. Seemingly, a US-led truce holding between Iran and Israel, the confidence that you have that will continue to hold. But again, the attention, as it should be now, going back to the situation in Gaza. Some reports that the most desperate in Gaza are starting to look at Hamas a little differently. I think your mic is off, Dr. van Heerden.
Apologies.
There we go.
On the situation, the truce is not going to hold, unfortunately, Naledi. This was a temporary reprieve for the State of Israel, for the Israeli government, Netanyahu's government. They underestimated the response they would get with their unprovoked act of aggression against the Iranians. Israel took a pounding. Israel, for all intents and purposes, was defeated in 12 days. They begged the United States to come to their aid, and hence we saw Trump responding by illegally bombing nuclear facilities that was under the IAEA protocol, safety protocols. So between the Israel and the United States, they have made their intentions clear that they want regime change. They needed a moment of pause because Israel was being battered by ballistic missiles, the likes of which ordinary Israelis have not seen since the formation of the State of Israel. Remember, Naledi, prior to these 12 days of war with Iran, Israel never really engaged in a war against another country, a nation state. It fought against Hamas, it fought against Hezbollah, it fought against the Hutus and militia groups in Syria and so on. This was the first time they were up against a nation state, 10 times their size, 90 million Iranian people, and the Iranians showed them fireworks, quite literally. And the US had to come to their aid. So the truce is not going to hold. They want to effect regime change, and we are going to see a resumption of the conflict soon.
Yeah.
On the second point with regards to Hamas and Gaza, we see a continuation of the genocide taking place in Gaza. Women, children, men being shot and killed as they go to the various aid points and wanting desperately food, and the collective West and the United States still condoning the genocide that's happening.
Yeah, I do want to have a moment to look at a very brief press briefing that we saw with US President Donald Trump this week. And Mr. Zedu, perhaps you want to take a stab at that one. One could argue what we saw was an exasperated Donald Trump, using very strong language that has gotten social media talking quite a bit, and people quite amused by, how frustrated he was about the actions of both countries. Is this what we saw, a US president who was realizing that he may not actually have as much sway as he'd like to have in this conflict, in your view?
Well, I think we shouldn't forget that Donald Trump really wants to be one of the Nobel Peace Laureates. So he was persuaded to go into this war, but it shouldn't tamper with his possibility to get this coveted award. So he bombs, and then he becomes the peacemaker. And when the people that must agree to him being the peacemaker do not agree, he then goes foul. Insofar as the actual war is concerned, there are two things for me. One was really just how Israel was able to do what it did, eliminating the top leadership of the Iranian Defense Force, and flying all over Iran with the kind of ease that I would have thought that Iran wouldn't allow. That was just the one thing for me. The second thing is that we actually don't know how much damage was inflicted on Israel, because there's censorship now. Whatever happens in Israel, only that which the IDF says can be said is said. So we don't know. They tell us there was some little damage in Haifa and a little bit in Tel Aviv, but we don't actually know. We know what happened in Iran because there isn't the kind of censorship around the damage that has been done. So it becomes an unequal analysis that one has to make in terms of what happened. But the very reason that Israel has imposed censorship must mean that there is a lot of stuff that they don't want to see.
Yeah. Well, as we watch things in the Middle East closely, Dr. Harvey, let's come to you. The position of South Africa really important, but not just South Africa. The African National Congress and how it communicates around this. Your suggestions, many would say, time to sit this one out. But we know that the ANC may very well have a really strong position. What do you make of that?
Sorry, Naledi, are you speaking about the
Iran and Israel?
GNB?
No, Iran and Israel and the position of South Africa, and as well as the ANC. Sit this one out, come out and speak, and what is the voice that we need to be sharing?
Well, Ramaphosa and the ANC has made their position, I think, quite strongly and quite clear, very critical, and I don't think perhaps sufficiently critical of Trump. In final analysis is the major factor. Naledi, Israel would never have survived in an area of utter hostility and hatred towards the state of Israel was it not for the military and financial backing of Trump, which is really the worst president I think we've ever seen in the entire history of the United States. But the ANC's position, I think I don't have any serious problems with it. I just think that they should perhaps have been a bit more assertive. You've seen what happened with that meeting with Ramaphosa and Trump in the Oval Office. I was not very impressed with the performance, honestly. I have different views about what happened there. I think Trump seemed to emerge, stronger from that meeting that they had. But basically, I think the ANC's stance on that conflict, is correct. They might be overplaying the whole question of the efficacy of continued diplomacy regarding that situation. You're not going to get, and that's why I suspect you're going to have a resumption of hostilities. I think Trump is, going to eventually return together with Israel, to a kind of intervention in that area that's going to give rise to perhaps an even greater level of animosity and warfare that we've seen in the past 2 weeks.
Yeah, we'll watch that closely, but I do want to move on to this. Just the most bizarre sort of situation of circumstances, and Mr. Tsedi, you've written about this, really concerning. Here we are, and we have the remains of a former president of another state sitting in South Africa and not being laid to rest. And in fact, we'll possibly know only in August what that is going to lead to. But you've written an interesting piece, and this is, I want to read from it. You say, it is nonsensical, childish and revolting that there should be a scrum between Lungu's family and the Zambian government over a body. Why is Hichilema so desperate to stand over Lungu's body? What a perspective. And what you've done in the piece is that you've actually gone back and looked at previous presidents of Zambia and really the relationships between incumbents and, going all the way back to Kenneth Kaunda. Let's please talk to us about what you make of the situation there and how it can be resolved.
Well, Zambia is very interesting when it comes to its leaders and former leaders, and Malawi in particular, because seemingly every other former president of Zambia has some a relative in Malawi, and this is used by an incumbent to say, because your father or your grandfather came from Malawi, you are no longer Zambian. But what we are faced with now is two guys who fought two elections in 2016 and 2021. Lungu won in 2016, and after winning, Hichilema didn't want to recognize the outcome of that election. And so they kept on fighting. Hichilema was even arrested and put in jail. And now Hichilema is president, and he takes away all the benefits that Lungu is entitled to. And then he gets sick. He can't use his medical aid because it's been cut off. So he comes to South Africa on his own, and he dies here. And as soon as he dies, the Zambian government now wants the body. They declare him now a national treasure, a national hero that must be buried by the president. But the guy had said, if I die or when I die, this Hichilema president should never come near my body. And the family is saying, these are the wishes of the guy. So pull back. But Hichilema doesn't want to. We saw the other time when the body was supposed to go back to Lusaka. And but the arrangements that had already been made in Lusaka were that Hichilema was going to receive the body, and the family said, in that case, he's not going, we'll bury him in South Africa. And Hichilema sends lawyers here, and the matter goes to court, and now it's been postponed to August. Lungu can't be buried until at least August. And it just looks like the sort of story that the World, a newspaper before Percy Koboza, used to run about families in townships fighting over a body because everybody wants to have the society money. And it's really childish, and it's revolting for a government to be involved in something like that. And for me, the biggest disappointment is that there doesn't seem to be any African leader of stature who can make the sort of intervention that somebody like Nyerere would have made, that would call this to a halt and make sure that the matter is settled with dignity.
Yeah, Dr. Van Heerden, your thoughts on this? I mean, Mr. Tsedu writes, and let me just read this quickly. The South African protocol of former presidents, including apartheid leaders, is that they should be given state funerals. But when P.W. Botha died, he left instructions that the state should not be involved. His wish was respected. Why can't the Zambian government do the same and take a step back? What do you make of that? This week I had a conversation with the ruling party of Zambia, of course, Hichilema's party, and this is the argument that they put on the table. Naledi, if a former president of South Africa died in Zambia, regardless of how he'd be seen, we would understand that that president must be sent back to South Africa. What do you think?
But if that South African president's wishes was not to be returned, then he should be buried locally. Firstly, let me say, I agree with the principle that these matters must be resolved through dialogue. I think the family needs to meet with the Zambian government and express very clearly not only because it was the express wishes of the deceased, but also why they feel it's not necessary. Remember, a government can still honor anyone in that person's absence. You don't need the physical body to actually honor that person. I think that there is malice. It's become a situation of personalities wanting to prove that they can win. And so if the express wishes of the former president was not to have anything to do with the current government, then I think that must be respected, and the family needs to express why they feel they want to not violate the last wishes of the deceased. I think it's become a personality issue. The president of Zambia wants to prove that he can bring the body back and wants to now place undue pressure on the South African government. And I think that's unfair.
And this is where I'm going to close off then, Dr. Harvey, your final thoughts. The difficult position that this situation puts South Africa in.
Yeah, Naledi, I think the utter hostility between Lungu and Hitzfeld is probably unprecedented in the entire history of Zambia. But I hope that on the 4th of August, when there's a court ruling, that it's in favor of the family. And I'll tell you for the simple reason that though the previous president, Kaunda, had a similar problem, don't forget, he wanted to be buried next to his wife and then lost the case in what is called the public interest at that time and was buried elsewhere. But this is a very different matter. I mean, the family has spoken that this was his wishes, that he did not want to see the current president near his burial, very strong words, which I really think that ultimately I think might give the edge to the court verdict on the 8th of August. I hope it does, because I think at the bottom of this is the power relations between the deceased family wishes and the state. And, this kind of thing, really, I hope that the court ruling is in favor of the family and that he is, probably buried in South Africa, as it seems to be their wishes.
Yeah. Gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show with us. Thank you so much for making time. We really do appreciate it. Dr. Oscar van Heerden there, international relations expert, Dr. Ibrahim Harvey, political analyst, and Mr. Matata Tsedu, former editor of the Sunday Times and former chair of the South African National Editors Forum. Let's take a short break. More news on the other side of this. Welcome back. So we did, of course, take a look at some of the WhatsApps that have come in from our viewers, and let's share some of those with you on the stories that stood out for you in the 7 days that have passed. Evening, what stood out for me is the DA's useless ultimatum to the president. It's Simon Nyalunga with that one. Veli Dlamini says, good evening. The stories that stood out for me are the stories of Shivambu forming a team that will eventually lead to the formation of a new political party at the GNU, ANC and DA crisis. Okay. Oh, and the GNU, ANC crisis. Okay, Veli? Oh gosh, quite the list there. Sipho says, good evening. For me, there are two stories that stood out this week. It was AfriForum's visit to the US White House. I'm still confused how they're not incarcerated for treason because they're not of presidency diplomacy. A second one is the incarceration of Lieutenant General Dumisani Khumalo. It shows there is a lot of internal crime and nepotism in the SAPS. That was certainly one that stood out for me as well. Thank you so much for that. Johannes says, stories that destroy our lives are political conflicts in the Middle East, to some countries in Africa, including South Africa's GNU, without direction. All this discourage the future of life to the whole universe. Okay. Johannes, thank you so much for your input as well.